Understanding song structure, chorus, and chords. Hello everyone, Robertinho here. Welcome back to the channel. This is Lecture 6 in our ongoing series, How to Visualize Theory on the Instrument. In our previous lesson, we took a major step forward. We moved from abstract harmonic theory to practical application on the guitar. We covered how to identify the harmonic function of each chord within a key, why certain chord progressions feel natural or emotionally powerful, how chords interact to create tension, movement, and resolution, and most importantly, how to apply all of this directly on your guitar. Today, in Lecture 6, we're going to build on these concepts and explore the next level. What you'll learn in this lesson. In this lesson, you'll learn how to solo over chords effectively, the chord shape method, identifying chord roots in the scale, how to visualize major and minor thirds, and perfect fifths within triads, using the low E string as a guide to follow the 12-tone sequence, the scale method, and the arpeggio method. But before we go into techniques, let's take a moment to understand a key foundation, song structure. Song structure, the foundation. So what exactly is song structure? Song structure refers to the way a song develops over time. It describes how different sections of a song, such as the verse, chorus, and bridge, are arranged and flow from one into another. Understanding this layout helps both composers and listeners. If a song lacks structure or becomes repetitive in an unpredictable way, like having a 6-line verse that merges awkwardly, it risks losing the listener's attention. Clear structure keeps the listener engaged and helps your composition make sense emotionally and musically. The verse. Let's start with the verse. The verse is often the first section of a song. It sets the tone and atmosphere, introducing musical themes and lyrical ideas. Verses typically repeat throughout a song, not necessarily with the same lyrics or even instrumentation, but often with a consistent chord progression and melodic structure. This repetition gives the listener something to hold on to. Chorus and chords, the hook. Now, let's focus on the chorus, especially from the perspective of chords. Think of the chorus as the centerpiece of the song. It's usually the most memorable section, the part that's singable and catchy, and the emotional climax of the composition. In many genres, especially pop, choruses are built around strong melodic chord progressions. These progressions are crafted to be pleasing and familiar to the ear. In this lesson, we'll look at how these choruses are constructed harmonically and how we can visualize and play them on the guitar. Moving into practice. With this foundation, we're ready to move into the practical part of the lesson. We'll explore how to solo over chords by understanding their internal structure, how to use chord shapes and scale patterns to navigate the fretboard, and how to break chords down into arpeggios to play them melodically and expressively. Soloing over chord changes is one of the most valuable skills you can learn as a guitarist, but it can also be one of the most challenging. It therefore needs to be broken down into the smallest steps possible. Let's begin with the scale method. The scale method is one way of finding chord tones in a typical major or minor key progression. The chords in most progressions can be connected to the major scale. If you picture this scale in its natural sequence, each degree of the scale marks the root of a new chord. So from 1 to 7, we have a sequence of 7 chords that reside within this scale system. E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, B major, C sharp minor, D sharp minor, E major. You'll often hear this referred to as harmonizing the major scale. You'll also commonly see Roman numerals used to symbolize these chords. Start by identifying the roots of each chord in the scale. For example, the first chord's root is the first note in the scale. The second chord's root is the second note. The third chord's root is the third note, etc. The next step is to work out which intervals in the major scale are used in each of its chords. For example, the 1 chord, which is major, uses the 1, 3, and 5 from the scale. The 2 chord, which is minor, uses the 2, 4, and 6 from the scale. The 3 chord, which again is minor, uses the 3, 5, and 7 from the scale. And so on it goes. The pattern you should see here is that when we move to the next chord in the sequence, so too do we move each note in the preceding chord to the next. Notice also how we take the root of the chord, add 2 for the third, and add another 2 for the fifth. Once you have this sequence committed to memory, you'll know exactly where the chord tones for each chord in a typical major key progression lie. The chord shape method involves identifying the chords you're playing over through familiar chord shapes on the fretboard, and using the tones within those shapes as marker points for your soloing phrases. Think of it like connect the dots, with the chord tones being the dots that help outline your solo. These chord tones will become your strongest and safest target notes, as they're part of the backing chords, so there's no risk of emphasizing an awkward or dissonant note. Once you have your chosen chord tones in place, you can then bridge them together into phrases, typically by using related scales. I understand this can feel a bit confusing at first, so let's go back for a more in-depth recap of everything we've covered so far. It's important that we fully understand how to build chords based on the scale degree numerals to understand intervals and arpeggios. The concept itself isn't overly complex, but it does require a clear explanation. So, I'll guide you through a detailed overview of the major and minor tones. 1, 3, 5. Major scale, tone, major third and perfect fifth. Minor scale, tone, minor third and perfect fifth. The intervals, and how they relate in the scale degrees. To make this as clear as possible, I'll demonstrate both visually on the charts and practically on the guitar fretboard. Let's begin with the major tones first. For this stage of the lesson, we're going to avoid using open position chord shapes. The reason is simple. We want to give ourselves as much flexibility as possible to move higher up the fretboard and fully visualize the concepts we're working on. When it comes to identifying chord tones, I like to use the low E, A, and D strings as reference points for building triads. Here's the approach. The low E string will serve as our tonic, degree 1. The A string will represent the third interval, which can be either major or minor, depending on the specific scale we're working with. The D string will represent the perfect fifth interval. By focusing on these 3 strings, we can clearly visualize the structure of triads in relation to their scale degrees. 1, root, 3, third, and 5, fifth. Just a quick note. For the sake of learning and visualization, all these chord shapes and examples will initially be built starting from the low E string. This makes it easier to connect the theory to the fretboard. However, as we progress through the course, you'll see that these chords can eventually be constructed and applied anywhere on the neck. That's part of the fun and freedom you'll gain as we move forward together on this journey. Our primary focus at this stage is to understand the functional role of each diatonic tone within the E major scale, both the major and minor tones. We'll begin with the tonic chord, which is E major, built from its 3 essential chord tones: the root, E, the major third, G sharp, and the perfect fifth, B. Following that, we'll explore the next 2 major chords within the key, a major and B major, analyzing their construction and position within the scale. For the minor chords in the key, we'll apply the same systematic approach, identifying their root, minor third, and perfect fifth, always relating them back to their respective scale degrees. Let's see them in this order. E, G sharp, B. Root, tonic 1. Major third. Perfect fifth. A, C sharp, E. Root, tonic 1. Major third. Perfect fifth. B, D sharp, F sharp. Root, tonic 1. Major third. Perfect fifth. C sharp, E, G sharp. Root, tonic 1. Minor third. Perfect fifth. F sharp, A, C sharp. Root, tonic 1. Minor third. Perfect fifth. G sharp, B, D sharp. Root, tonic 1. Minor third. Perfect fifth. D sharp, F sharp, A. Root, tonic 1, minor 3rd, diminished 5th. Now, let's clarify the main goals of this lesson. Memorize the position of the tonic note for each chord on the low E string. Memorize the shape of the major 3rd interval on the A string. Memorize the shape of the minor 3rd interval on the A string. Memorize the shape of the perfect 5th interval on the D string. Memorize the 3 notes that form each chord. If you're still unfamiliar with the note names across the guitar fretboard, this is also a great opportunity to start learning and memorizing them. This exercise will reinforce your fretboard knowledge while working on harmony. Additionally, you can find audio examples and practice tracks for this lesson on my channel to help guide your ear training. Finally, let's take a moment to understand how each of these chord tones functions within the scale degrees. This will give you a deeper grasp of intervals and lay the foundation for future lessons on scale harmonization and melodic voice leading. 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 6, 3, 5, 7, 4, 6, 1, 5, 7, 2, 6, 1, 3, 7, 2, 4, 1, 3, 5. While scales provide the essential building blocks for constructing a solo, it is equally important to focus on the intentional selection of individual notes. This approach helps give your solo greater musicality and expressive purpose. When a single scale fits over multiple chords, or even the entire progression, it becomes easy to fall into the habit of aimlessly running up and down the scale, relying on it to carry the musical content. By placing more emphasis on thoughtful note selection, we can craft phrases that communicate much more effectively and convey a stronger musical statement. And with that, we'll wrap up this lesson. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information all at once. You already have plenty of material here to practice and absorb. Take your time to visualize everything we discussed today. Go over the exercises at your own pace and really let the concepts sink in. I'll see you in the next lesson, where we'll continue building on these ideas. Thank you so much for watching and for supporting my work here on the channel. Peace and cheers.